Imagine finding, a connection on a dating site.
Right, which happens every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the person is charming, they are highly successful, and over the course of several weeks, maybe even months, they build this genuine sense of trust with you.
Yeah, it's a very slow, methodical process.
It really is. Then, one evening, they casually share a tip about a new digital investment platform that is making them like an absolute fortune.
Oh boy, here we go.
Right. But because you trust them, and because they offer to patiently walk you through the whole complex setup, you put in a little bit of money.
Just to test the waters.
Exactly. And the interface looks total professional. You literally watch your portfolio skyrocket. It feels like you have finally cracked the code to financial independence.
But then reality hits.
Yeah. The exact moment you try to cash out, the moment you try to move that money back to your bank account, the person blocks you.
And the platform goes dark.
Yep. Every single cent of your funds just vanishes into thin air.
It is a completely devastating scenario. And the really scary part is that the architecture of the technology they use, well, it ensures that the money is permanently irretrievable. The ledger just cannot be reversed.
That permanence is the trap. It sounds like a Hollywood thriller, but it is a very real industrialized operation known as a pig butchering scam.
Yeah, where the victim is essentially fattened up with fake gains before the slaughter.
Right, and it represents the dark, entirely unregulated side of a technology that is, at the same time, poised to completely revolutionize global finance.
It's a wild paradox.
It really is. Welcome to this deep dive for Managing the Future, the MIS podcast. The show is designed specifically for the Dr. Sam Pack College of Business students at Tarleton State University, and really anyone out there looking to seriously navigate the future of enterprise operations.
Because the future is already here.
It is. Today we are opening up Module 22, Blockchains and Cryptocurrencies. And this is all based on the Connect Master, Management Information Systems textbook by Richard Tedman and Casey Wilhelm, published by McGraw-Hill in 2026.
It's just a critical subject for any modern business student. We are looking at a foundational technology that completely redefines digital trust.
Right, like how ownership is proven.
Exactly. And how value moves seamlessly across the globe without, any traditional intermediaries.
But before we get into the plumbing of how all that value moves, we need to do a quick architectural bridge. Because last time, in Module 21, we spent a lot of time on artificial intelligence.
You really dug into it.
We did. We looked at how AI and cognitive computing emulate human learning to make these highly complex, automated, data-driven decisions at lightning speed.
Right. Exploring machine learning, neural networks.
Basically, we built the brain of future business operations.
And that connection is absolutely vital for enterprise architecture. Because, well, if AI acts as the brain, making rapid business decisions based on massive data sets, right?
Yeah.
Say, an AI optimizing a global supply chain or executing high-frequency trades, that AI needs a place to record its actions.
It needs a ledger.
Exactly, it needs a ledger. But if that ledger is just a standard centralized database, a bad actor could hack it.
Oh, and alter the historical data.
Right, and essentially gaslight the AI into making terrible future decisions.
Wow, gaslighting an AI. That's a scary thought.
It is. So blockchain is the secure, unchangeable foundation that can safely execute and record the AI's decisions.
So think of AI as the entity figuring out what to do, and blockchain as the secure, immutable infrastructure ensuring it actually gets done.
Yes, transparently and permanently. Together, they form the absolute baseline of next-generation enterprise IT.
The brain and the ledger. I love that framework. Now, before we start pulling apart the mechanics of that ledger, a quick favor to ask you, our listener. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and share this deep dive.
It really helps us out.
It does. And please, drop a comment below. We want you in this conversation with us as we navigate these tech modules, especially when we get into the real-world applications later on.
So, to understand the ledger, we really have to start with the fundamental architecture, like what actually is a blockchain.
Right. Let's break it down.
The textbook makes a really grounded economic comparison to gold. If we strip away the cultural significance, why does gold have inherent economic value?
Well, it's a physical asset that possesses specific, unalterable properties. It doesn't corrode, it doesn't rust away, and perhaps most importantly, you cannot artificially print more of it.
Right. The scarcity is verifiable.
Exactly.
Precisely. Gold retains its worth because of its chemical immutability and its verifiable scarcity. I mean, the amount of gold in circulation doesn't suddenly double overnight.
Right. You can't just synthesize it.
Right. So blockchain technology basically translates those physical properties into the digital realm. Once a blockchain is constructed, new links or blocks of data can be added to the chain.
Okay.
But the existing chain can never be retroactively altered, edited, or deleted.
That permanence is really the entire value proposition. But how does that actually work at a structural level? Because, I mean, in a traditional digital database, an administrator with the right credentials can go in and change any cell in a spreadsheet.
Oh, absolutely.
So how does blockchain prevent the administrator from, changing the past?
To grasp the structure, we actually have to look at the foundational architecture of the internet itself.
Okay, take us back.
The internet relies on a technology called packet switching. In the early days of telecommunications, if you made a phone call, there was a dedicated, continuous physical wire connecting you to the receiver.
Right, like the old switchboard operators plugging in wires.
Exactly. But the internet changed that. Instead of a dedicated connection, a digital message is broken down into discrete, independent packets of data.
And what's in those packets?
Well, each packet contains a sender address, a receiver address, the payload data itself, and an identifying code that tells the receiving computer how to reassemble it in relation to the packet that precedes it.
So the data packets can take, like, 1,000 different routes across global servers, but they all know exactly what line they're supposed to stand in when they finally reach their destination.
Exactly. Blockchain takes that concept of sequential cryptographic linking and applies it to a database of transactions. In a blockchain, every single block contains 3 critical components.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, there is a hash. A hash is a unique, fixed-length identifying code generated by a cryptographic algorithm.
Kind of like a digital fingerprint.
Very much like that. If you put the exact same data through the algorithm, you get the exact same hash. But if you change even a single comma in the data, the entire hash changes completely.
Wow, even just a comma.
Yep. Second, the block contains a timestamp. And third, and this is the genius part, it contains the exact hash of the block that immediately precedes it.
Okay, let's pause here and think about what that actually means for a system's integrity. It is essentially a digital game of Jenga, right?
That's a great way to picture it.
Because if an attacker wants to go back and alter a transaction from a year ago, say they want to give themselves $1 million, they have to change the data in that old block.
Right. But the moment they change the data, the hash of that block instantly changes.
And because the hash changes, the next block in the chain, which was pointing to the old hash, is suddenly pointing to something that no longer exists.
The cryptographic link is totally broken. The system immediately recognizes the tampering because the hashes no longer match up.
So to successfully alter that old transaction, the attacker wouldn't just have to change one block.
No, they would have to simultaneously recalculate and change the hashes of every single block that came after it across the entire network before the network adds the next legitimate block.
Which, from a computational standpoint, is just practically impossible.
Completely impossible. The network just rejects the tampered block and maintains the consensus version. This mathematical immutability is what gives the database its intrinsic value.
That makes so much sense. Now, if we look at public blockchains, like the one that underpins Bitcoin, which really initiated this whole movement back in 2008, the textbook lended out several defining attributes. Let's synthesize these, because they represent a massive departure from traditional corporate IT.
Yeah, they really do. The first major shift is the structural rhythm. A blockchain isn't a continuous stream of data.
Right, it's not like a running faucet.
Exactly. It consists of discrete blocks added at specific intervals. In the Bitcoin network, for instance, a new block of aggregated transactions is verified and added roughly every 10 minutes.
Okay.
The second defining feature is that public blockchains are permissionless.
And that is a terrifying word for a traditional chief information security officer.
Oh, they hate it.
Because permissionless means there are no access controls, no firewalls keeping people out, and no IT department provisioning user accounts. Anyone with an internet connection can download the software, access the public ledgers, and view the entire history of the database.
It flips the traditional security model totally upside down. Instead of securing the perimeter to keep bad actors out, the system assumes bad actors are already inside.
And it just uses cryptography to ensure they cannot do any damage.
Exactly. Which ties directly into the third attribute, There is no centralized controlling authority. The network operates on a peer-to-peer basis.
So no central bank clearing transactions, no government agency monitoring the flow.
And no corporate server hosting the master file. Every participant or node has a copy of the ledger.
But wait, if thousands of independent computers are all running the software without a central boss, how do they communicate seamlessly?
That requires the fourth attribute, standard protocols. Just like the early internet relied on standard protocols like TCP/IP so that a Mac could talk to a PC, blockchain relies on construction and protocol standards.
Like the ones established by organizations like NIST, IE, and ISO?
Exactly. These standards ensure that regardless of what hardware a node is using, the cryptographic rules of engagement remain universal.
And that brings us to the final, and arguably the most crucial, attribute. If there is no central bank and no CEO, how do all these independent, anonymous computers agree on which transactions are valid?
Right. How do they agree on the truth?
Yeah, that requires a consensus mechanism.
Yes, it does. The consensus mechanism is the mathematical protocol that verifies the validity of a new block before it is permanently added to the chain. It replaces the trust we normally place in a central institution with trust in cryptographic math.
Before we get into the heavy engineering of how those consensus mechanisms actually function, I want to make sure you, listening right now, understand the business utility of this architecture.
Because it's not just theory.
Right. It is very easy to dismiss blockchain as just the casino engine for trading digital coins. But the textbook highlights several real-world, enterprise-level applications where an immutable ledger solves massive operational bottlenecks.
Like supply chain management.
Exactly. Let's talk about that.
Supply chains are notoriously opaque. If you are a multinational grocery chain, tracking the exact origin of a head of romaine lettuce across dozens of independent distributors, trucking companies, and warehouses is an absolute nightmare.
Especially during a recall.
Yes. But by utilizing a blockchain, every time that lettuce changes hands, a permanent, unalterable record is added to the ledger. So if there is an E. coli outbreak, the grocer doesn't have to spend weeks auditing paper records.
They can just query the blockchain and trace the contaminated lettuce back to the specific farm in seconds.
The immutability guarantees the data hasn't been forged by a middleman trying to cover their tracks.
The text also applies this to the diamond industry, which is super interesting. Diamond merchants are leveraging blockchain to create digital certificates for diamonds the exact moment they are pulled from the mine.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. As the diamond moves to the cutter, the wholesaler, and the jeweler, the blockchain tracks its provenance. It is an incredibly powerful tool for filtering out blood diamonds mined unethically in war-torn regions. Because if the diamond doesn't have a cryptographic history dating back to a legitimate mine, the market just rejects it.
We see parallel applications in healthcare, too.
Right, counterfeit meds.
Exactly. Counterfeit medications are a massive global issue. A blockchain can track a medication from the pharmaceutical manufacturer directly to the pharmacy shelf. That ensures that unscrupulous suppliers aren't intercepting shipments and altering expiration dates.
Or watering down the drugs.
Exactly. Furthermore, it offers a framework for securing electronic health records, where the patient controls the cryptographic keys to their medical history, rather than a fragmented network of hospital servers.
And obviously, there are massive implications for financial services. A blockchain can act as an unbreakable escrow account. You can issue bonds, create certificates of deposit, and execute complex financial agreements without needing a traditional bank to act as the trusted intermediary holding the funds.
But all of these enterprise use cases, the supply chain tracking, the healthcare records, the financial escrows, they all rely entirely on the network's ability to agree on the state of the ledger without a central authority.
Right. If the consensus mechanism fails, the entire value proposition just collapses.
Let's look under the hood.
Yeah. How do these consensus engines actually work? If we have a network of thousands of anonymous computers, and some of them might be actively trying to cheat the system, how do we achieve consensus?
Well, this is a classic computer science dilemma known as the Byzantine generals problem, where independent actors must agree on a coordinated strategy, but some of the actors might be traitors sending false information. The original breakthrough that solved this for blockchain is called proof of work, or POW. This is the consensus mechanism that launched Bitcoin, and it was originally utilized by Ethereum as well.
Walk us through the mechanics of proof of work. How does it filter out the bad actors?
In a proof-of-work system, the protocol demands that participants expend real-world resources to earn the right to update the ledger. When a new block of transactions needs to be verified, the algorithm generates a highly complex, unpredictable mathematical puzzle.
Okay.
Specifically, the computers on the network, which are called miners, must take the data in the block, add a random number to it called a nonce, and run it through a cryptographic hash function.
So they are looking for a very specific output.
Right. They are looking for a hash output that meets a very specific, difficult target, like a hash that starts with 60 consecutive zeros.
And because of the avalanche effect we talked about earlier, where even a comma changes everything, there is no way to reverse engineer the math. You can't just solve an equation to find the correct nonce. The only way to find the winning hash is through brute force.
Exactly. The miners have to guess millions or even trillions of different nonces every single second until one of them accidentally discovers the correct input that produces the required hash.
And then what happens?
The miner who discovers it first broadcasts the solution to the network. The other nodes can instantly and easily verify that the math is correct.
Right. Checking the math is easy. Solving it is hard.
Yes. So the winning miner gets to place the block on the chain, and as a reward for expending all that computational effort, the protocol automatically mints new cryptocurrency and awards it to them.
It is an elegant economic incentive. You have to prove you did the cryptographic work to get the reward. If you try to validate fraudulent transactions, the rest of the network will easily see the math is wrong, they will reject your block, and you will have wasted all that computing power for nothing.
It makes cheating economically irrational.
But, as the textbook points out, there is a massive structural drawback to proof of work.
There really is. The primary vulnerability is its inherent inefficiency. The security of the network relies on making the puzzle extremely difficult to solve. As the network grows and more miners join to compete for the reward, the protocol automatically increases the difficulty of the puzzle to ensure blocks are only produced every 10 minutes.
This is the arms race.
A huge arms race. It requires vast warehouses of specialized computers running at maximum capacity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The electricity consumption required to secure a massive proof-of-work network is equivalent to the energy demands of a small industrialized nation.
Yeah, and from a corporate ESG perspective, environmental, social, and governance, that energy footprint is a massive liability. A modern enterprise cannot build its IT infrastructure on a system that burns that much physical electricity just to process basic database entries.
They just can't justify it.
So developers had to find a way to achieve the same cryptographic consensus without the environmental cost. This led to the development of the second major mechanism, proof of stake, or PS. How does this pivot the economic model?
Proof of stake entirely removes the need for giant server farms brute-forcing math problems. Instead of expending physical electricity to prove their commitment to the network, participants put up their own capital as collateral. This collateral is the blockchain's native cryptocurrency, and it is referred to as a stake. In the system, the participants are called validators, not miners.
So instead of a mathematical race, how does the network decide who gets to add the next block?
The protocol uses a randomized algorithm to select a validator to forge the next block. The primary metric for selection is the size of the validator stake. The more collateral an individual locks up in the system, the higher the probability they will be selected to validate the block and earn the associated transaction fees.
It functions like a massive security deposit. You put down millions of dollars in collateral to prove you will be an honest bookkeeper. And if the protocol selects you and you attempt to validate a fraudulent transaction, the network's consensus rules will execute a slashing condition. The protocol will literally seize and burn your staked collateral.
You act honestly because the financial penalty for cheating vastly outweighs any potential gain from a fraudulent transaction.
That is the core game theory of proof of stake. And the operational pros are profound. Because you aren't running trillions of hash calculations, POS networks are vastly faster, they can process exponentially more transactions per second, and they use a fraction of a percent of the electricity required by proof of work.
Yes, and that scalability is why so much enterprise development is focused on POS networks.
But I have to push back on the economic design here. If I'm analyzing this from a macroeconomic standpoint, proof of stake has a massive get-richer flaw built right into its core.
How so?
Well, because validators get a percentage of the transaction fees, and you need a massive stake to consistently get chosen to validate.
Yeah.
The entities that start with the most capital simply accumulate more capital without producing any external value.
It is a valid critique of the Gini coefficient within POS systems, for sure. Wealth concentration is a real systemic risk.
And it creates a theoretical security vector as well. In a proof-of-work system, executing a 51% attack, where a malicious actor controls the majority of the network and can halt transactions, requires building impossible amounts of physical infrastructure.
Right.
But in a proof-of-stake system, a sufficiently capitalized hostile entity could theoretically just buy up 51% of the total stake supply to take over the network. It requires a highly distributed, wealthy, initial investor base to function securely. Otherwise, it just becomes a plutocracy governed by the largest token holders.
Which is why neither system is perfect, right?
Yeah.
They balance different compromises in the pursuit of decentralized consensus. Now, if we look at the enterprise sector, many corporations want the immutability of a blockchain, but they absolutely refuse to surrender control of their database to a decentralized network of anonymous validators.
They want control.
Exactly. For these private corporate environments, the textbook introduces a third option, proof of authority, or POA.
This sounds like a corporate compromise. Does the guy in the suit come back into the picture?
Essentially, yes. In a proof of authority system, the validators are not anonymous actors competing with computing power or capital. They are publicly known, certified, and legally accountable entities.
Okay, so there is accountability.
Right. The network relies on a small number of highly trusted nodes to verify the authenticity of each new block. You see this utilized in private consortium blockchains, like instances of Microsoft blockchain, where a group of allied banks or supply chain partners want a shared immutable ledger, but they want to strictly control who is allowed to write to it.
So it sacrifices decentralization to guarantee regulatory compliance and operational speed.
Exactly.
The textbook also touches on a few emerging consensus mechanisms that developers are experimenting with to solve niche business problems. We don't need to break down the math of every single one, but let's look at the operational theory behind them. Hybrid consensus authority, for instance.
Sure. Hybrid models attempt to merge the security benefits of proof of work with the speed and efficiency of proof of stake or proof of authority. They might use one mechanism to mint new blocks and another mechanism to finalize them, balancing the trade-offs.
Makes sense. Then there's proof of history, or POH.
Proof of history is fascinating because it tackles the problem of time in a distributed network. Instead of nodes constantly arguing over the chronological order of transactions, POH uses a cryptographic clock to embed a verifiable timestamp directly into the ledger.
Oh, that's clever.
It creates an indisputable historical record that proves a specific event occurred at a precise moment in time, before or after another event, which drastically reduces the communication overhead required for consensus.
We also see proof of contribution, or PPOC.
Proof of contribution is a specialized variant of proof of stake. Instead of just selecting validators based on capital, the algorithm analyzes the behavioral history of the nodes. It calculates which specific nodes are actively contributing the most value, utility, or positive participation to the network overall, and weights their validation probability accordingly.
And finally, proof of burn. POBRI. This sounds economically aggressive.
It is a highly deflationary economic model. Instead of buying physical mining hardware, miners are required to send a certain number of their own tokens to an irretrievable public address, permanently destroying or burning them.
Wow, just throwing away money.
Sort of. By destroying their own capital, they earn the right to create a new block and earn future rewards. It demonstrates a long-term economic commitment to the network without the environmental toll of proof of work, while simultaneously decreasing the total supply of the currency.
Okay, so we have established the architecture of the ledger, the block structure and the engines that power it, the consensus mechanisms. Now we can examine the financial layer that sits on top of this infrastructure. Cryptocurrency.
Let's do it.
What defines a cryptocurrency in a business context?
At its core, cryptocurrency is digital money built natively on a blockchain. It is a completely decentralized medium of exchange and unit of account. The crucial distinction between cryptocurrency and fiat currency, like the US dollar or the euro, is monetary policy.
Right.
The supply of US dollars is controlled by the Federal Reserve, which can print more money to stimulate the economy or raise interest rates to restrict liquidity. A cryptocurrency's supply and monetary policy are entirely controlled by hard-coded, transparent protocols.
Which brings up the most common question skeptics have. If I hold a $20 bill, I know exactly what it buys. It is backed by the economic output and the military power of the United States government. Why does a string of digital code, backed by no government and no physical commodity, have any financial value?
The valuation of cryptocurrency comes down to three interconnected economic factors. First is verifiable scarcity. Take Bitcoin, for example. The protocol strictly limits the total number of Bitcoins that will ever be minted to 21 million.
Right. You can't lobby a central bank to print a 22nd million.
Exactly. That absolute scarcity creates a foundational floor for value in an environment where fiat currencies are constantly subject to inflation.
The second factor is utility.
Yes, and we will explore this deeply when we get to smart contracts, but many cryptocurrencies are the required fuel to operate decentralized computing networks. If a business wants to build an application on the Ethereum blockchain, they must purchase Ethereum currency to pay for the network's computing power. The utility drives constant market demand.
And the third factor, which honestly is the most difficult for traditional finance analysts to model, is investor belief. The network effect. It has value simply because a critical mass of global participants agree that it has value as a medium of exchange.
It sounds abstract, but that shared illusion of value is how all fiat money functions today since we abandoned the gold standard. And the belief in crypto is moving from retail speculation into sovereign adoption.
Yeah, the textbook notes that Bitcoin is officially recognized as legal tender in El Salvador and the Central African Republic.
Right. Major corporations hold it on their balance sheets, and professional athletes are negotiating their contracts in cryptocurrency.
But from an operational standpoint, if it is completely virtual, where does the asset actually reside? If a corporation buys $10 million worth of Bitcoin, where is it physically stored?
This is a fundamental paradigm shift that businesses must understand. The cryptocurrency never actually leaves the blockchain network. You do not download a coin onto your company servers.
So it's not like a file on a hard drive.
No, not at all. The asset exists purely as a verifiable entry on the distributed public ledger. What you are actually storing are the cryptographic software keys that identify you as the rightful owner of that address, granting you the exclusive authority to move that currency on the network.
It utilizes asymmetric cryptography. You have a public key, which acts like a mailbox address that anyone can see and send funds to, and a private key, which is the singular password required to unlock the mailbox and authorize a transaction.
Exactly. And you store these keys in a crypto wallet. The textbook outlines three primary classifications of wallets, each with distinct risk profiles for corporate treasury management.
Let's start with hardware wallets.
Okay, hardware wallets.
A hardware wallet is a dedicated physical device, often resembling a USB thumb drive. Its sole purpose is to generate and store your private keys in a completely offline environment. Most enterprise-grade hardware wallets require the user to physically press buttons on the device to enter a PA, and they often incorporate biometric authorization or complex multi-factor authentication.
So if we look at a risk assessment, the pros are massive. Because the private keys never touch an internet-connected device until the exact moment a transaction is signed, a hardware wallet is practically immune to remote cyber attacks.
Yes, very secure. The cons, however, are physical. If a CFO loses the hardware wallet and the backup recovery phrase, or if it is destroyed in a fire, that corporate asset is gone permanently. There is no central authority to petition. You cannot click forgot password and have a customer service rep restore your $10 million.
Which is why enterprise custody often involves multi-signature hardware setups where a transaction requires, say, 3 out of 5 board members to physically authorize a transaction with independent hardware wallets.
Right, redundancy.
Exactly. The second category is the online wallet, or a hot wallet. These are software applications installed on a smartphone, a desktop computer, or hosted as a browser extension.
The primary advantage here is operational liquidity, right? Hot wallets are incredibly convenient for making rapid everyday transactions or interacting with decentralized applications. But the security trade-off is severe.
Precisely. Because hot wallets are inherently connected to the internet, they present a constant attack surface. They are vulnerable to malware, keyloggers, and sophisticated phishing attacks. The security of the funds is only as robust as the device's password and the user's operational security hygiene.
And the third type is the paper wallet, which is often referred to as cold storage. It sounds almost archaic for a revolutionary digital asset.
It is the ultimate low-tech security solution. A paper wallet involves literally printing the alphanumeric strings of your public and private keys, or their QR code equivalents, onto a physical piece of paper and storing that document in a highly secure physical location, like a bank vault or a secure deposit box.
Wow, actual paper.
Yes, it is highly inconvenient if you need to execute rapid trades, but because the keys are entirely analog and disconnected from any digital network, they can never be compromised by a remote cybercriminal.
Okay, so a business has established its wallet infrastructure and secured its keys. Now they need to acquire the digital assets or convert them back into fiat currency to cover operational expenses. The text details three structural models for cryptocurrency exchanges. First, traditional exchanges.
Traditional crypto exchanges operate very similarly to legacy stock exchanges like the NASDAQ. You have major platforms like Binance or Coinbase. They act as a centralized intermediary, maintaining massive liquidity pools and utilizing order books to match buyers and sellers.
Okay.
When you trade on a traditional exchange, you are essentially trusting them to custody your assets during the trade, and they charge a small percentage fee for facilitating the transaction. They're highly liquid and allow you to trade crypto for fiat currency, but they are centralized honeypots that can be targeted by regulators or hackers.
The second model is the peer-to-peer or P2P exchange. These are essentially decentralized trading platforms.
In a P2P model, you completely bypass the centralized middleman. The platform merely provides the software infrastructure for you to negotiate and trade directly with another individual on the network, often utilizing smart contracts to hold the funds in escrow until both parties confirm the transaction.
And the business advantage there.
The primary business advantage is that transaction fees are incredibly low. However, P2P exchanges suffer from lower liquidity, meaning a large corporate trade could take longer to settle, and they shift the burden of counterparty risk entirely onto the user, making them difficult for novice operators to navigate safely.
Which naturally leads to the third model, cryptocurrency brokerage firms.
Think of a brokerage firm like a high-end currency exchange booth at an international airport. The broker is not matching you with another seller. The broker is acting as the counterparty. They buy and sell the cryptocurrency from their own massive reserves directly to the client.
So it's super easy.
It is by far the easiest, fastest, and most user-friendly way for a corporation to acquire digital assets. But the broker charges a significant premium, or a wide spread on the price, for providing that seamless convenience.
It is vital for business students to analyze these exchange models because corporate treasury management is rapidly evolving. When companies like Tesla or MicroStrategy execute billion-dollar acquisitions of Bitcoin, they aren't using a smartphone app. They are utilizing complex brokerage and institutional custody solutions.
Exactly. Understanding the cost-benefit analysis of liquidity versus fees versus counterparty risk on these platforms is becoming a baseline requirement for modern corporate finance.
And that institutional understanding must also include a rigorous analysis of the risk vectors, which brings us to the most dangerous aspects of this unregulated ecosystem.
Right, the dark side.
This brings us full circle to the hook of our deep dive, the pig butchering scam. If we are evaluating the enterprise viability of blockchain, we have to look at the dark side of digital currency. We talked about the psychological mechanics of the scam, the meticulous social engineering, building trust, showing fake early gains on a manipulated interface, and then vanishing when the victim attempts to off-ramp their funds back into fiat currency.
Yeah.
But from a structural perspective, that is just one vector. The textbook details several market manipulation tactics that thrive in an unregulated environment. Let's examine the pump and dump.
The pump and dump is a classic securities fraud tactic. But the speed and global reach of cryptocurrency, combined with social media, has supercharged its effectiveness. The mechanics are straightforward. A coordinated group of insiders quietly accumulates a massive position in a specific, usually highly illiquid and low-value cryptocurrency. Because the market cap is small, their initial purchases don't significantly move the price.
Then the manipulation phase begins.
Exactly. The insiders utilize coordinated campaigns across platforms like Twitter, Reddit, and Discord to create massive artificial hype around the coin. They might invent fake partnerships, utilize bot networks to trend hashtags, or pay influencers to promote the asset.
And people fall for it.
Retail investors see the sudden surge in social sentiment, they experience FOMO, the fear of missing out, and they rapidly deploy capital into the asset. This sudden influx of demand pumps the price of the coin up exponentially.
And the moment the price hits the insider's target, they execute the dump. They liquidate their massive holdings into the incoming retail demand, instantly crushing the price.
The insiders walk away with massive profits.
And the retail investors are left holding bags of an entirely worthless asset that has zero underlying liquidity. It is predatory market manipulation. But as bad as a pump and dump is, the rug pull is structurally more insidious because it exploits the very technology investors are trusting.
A rug pull leverages the anonymity of decentralized development. In this scenario, the actual developers create a new cryptocurrency project, often a decentralized finance protocol or a new token. They write the smart contracts, they market the project, and they convince investors to deposit massive amounts of capital into the protocol's liquidity pools to earn high yields.
And because it's a decentralized network, the investors assume the code is secure.
But the developers intentionally build a back door into the smart contract. Once the liquidity pool holds millions of dollars of investor capital, the developers trigger the back door. They instantly drain all the valuable assets from the pool, abandon the project, and delete their online presence.
Oh, wow.
Because the blockchain is immutable, the transactions draining the pool are permanent. The investors don't just lose money on a bad trade. The underlying architecture of the project is fundamentally gutted, leaving them with absolutely nothing.
That structural finality is terrifying for compliance officers. And beyond the orchestrated scams, there is the ever-present threat of hacking. However, the textbook makes a vital distinction here regarding where the actual vulnerabilities lie. When we see headlines about a $100 million crypto hack, the public assumes the blockchain cryptography was broken.
Which is almost never the case. The cryptographic foundation of major blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum is incredibly robust. The cost to directly attack the network consensus far outweighs the potential reward. The vast majority of major hacks are the result of vulnerabilities in the secondary layer. Poorly audited smart contracts, compromised centralized exchanges, or human error.
Social engineering remains the most effective attack vector. A cybercriminal doesn't need a supercomputer to break SHA-256 encryption. They just need to send a sophisticated phishing email to a corporate treasury manager, tricking them into clicking a malicious link or authorizing a fraudulent smart contract signature, which grants the criminal direct access to the hot wallet keys.
Right, they aren't hacking the blockchain, they are hacking the human operator.
And even if an enterprise perfectly secures its keys and avoids all fraudulent protocols, they still face the operational nightmare of extreme price volatility.
Yeah, the volatility is wild.
This is the crux of the enterprise debate. Bitcoin has achieved a market capitalization surpassing $1 trillion. Yet its value routinely swings wildly from month to month or even week to week. If I'm a CFO, I am terrified of that volatility.
Any CFO would be.
I cannot run a global payroll or manage a corporate supply chain if the underlying currency might drop 20% between the time an invoice is issued and the time the vendor cashes it out. Why does a trillion-dollar asset remain so volatile?
The volatility is a direct function of its economic design. As we discussed, unlike a share of stock, which represents an ownership stake in a revenue-generating company with cash flows, or a physical commodity like oil, which has industrial utility, a purely monetary cryptocurrency like Bitcoin has no intrinsic structural backing.
So it's just sentiment.
Its valuation is derived entirely from market liquidity, macroeconomic sentiment, and the collective faith of its holders. Without a central bank to intervene in the open market to smooth out price shocks by adjusting supply, the asset is completely exposed to raw supply and demand dynamics, resulting in extreme volatility.
So if I'm a business major analyzing this landscape, a landscape fraught with pig butchering operations, rug pulls, sophisticated social engineering, and wild, unanchored volatility, why should I take this technology seriously as a foundation for future enterprise operations? Why isn't this entire ecosystem just a highly volatile, globally distributed casino?
That is exactly the question every corporate strategist must ask, and the answer requires looking past the speculative trading of the currencies themselves and focusing on the underlying infrastructure. The true disruptive business value of blockchain isn't necessarily in holding Bitcoin on a balance sheet to speculate on its price. The value is in the execution capabilities the technology enables. It is about deploying autonomous smart contracts, building decentralized applications, and fundamentally restructuring how digital assets and agreements are managed.
So it's about what you can build on it.
Yes. To understand how that enterprise infrastructure actually works, we need to clarify the taxonomy of the assets running on it. We must define the operational difference between coins and tokens.
This is a major point of confusion because in popular media, those terms are used completely interchangeably. But from an IT architecture standpoint, what is the functional difference between a coin and a token?
The distinction lies in network sovereignty. A cryptocurrency coin operates on its own native, independent blockchain infrastructure. Bitcoin is a coin because it operates exclusively on the Bitcoin blockchain. Ethereum is a coin because it powers the Ethereum blockchain.
Okay, so the coin is the network.
The native coin is deeply integrated into the consensus mechanism. It is the asset used to pay the miners or validators to secure the network. A coin never leaves its native ledger. A transaction merely updates the ownership state of the addresses on that specific blockchain.
So native coins own the underlying infrastructure. They own the highway they drive on. What about tokens?
Tokens do not possess their own independent blockchain. Instead, they are created, hosted, and executed on top of an existing blockchain platform, most commonly the Ethereum network. Tokens are essentially complex smart contracts that represent a specific asset or utility.
So they use the existing highway.
Because they piggyback on an existing network, developers can launch a token without having to build a global network of miners and validators from scratch.
Tokens are renting space on someone else's highway. They represent assets, they can be transferred, and they can interact with other decentralized applications. But this structural difference creates a massive interoperability bottleneck for businesses. Well, what if an enterprise holds its treasury in Bitcoin, which lives natively on the Bitcoin blockchain, but they want to deploy that capital into a decentralized lending application that only exists on the Ethereum blockchain? The two networks possess entirely different cryptographic architectures. They do not speak the same language.
Right. This lack of interoperability was a massive barrier to liquidity. To solve it, developers engineered a financial bridge called wrapped tokens. The process works like this. If you want to utilize your Bitcoin on the Ethereum network, you send your native Bitcoin to a specialized third-party custodian like the Wren protocol or a centralized entity like BitGo.
Okay, so you give it to a custodian.
The custodian receives your Bitcoin and securely locks it in a verifiable vault on the Bitcoin blockchain.
They essentially freeze the original asset.
Exactly. Then, utilizing a smart contract on the Ethereum network, the custodian mints an exact equivalent amount of a new token called Wrapped Bitcoin, or WBTC. This WBTC is an ERC20 token, meaning it is programmed to function perfectly within the Ethereum ecosystem.
That's really smart.
Its value is pegged one-to-one with the locked Bitcoin. You can now use your WBTC to interact with Ethereum-based financial applications. When you are done, you send the WBTC back to the custodian's smart contract. The WBTC is permanently burned or destroyed on the Ethereum network, and your original Bitcoin is unlocked and returned to you on the Bitcoin network.
It is a brilliant workaround. It operates exactly like exchanging your US dollars for casino chips. You can't put a $20 bill into the slot machine. You have to exchange it for a chip that the machine's architecture recognizes. Your dollars are locked in the casino vault while you play the games, and you cash the chips back out for dollars when you leave.
That is a perfect analogy.
But to do anything on these networks, especially on a highly utilized network like Ethereum, the infrastructure requires payment. The textbook refers to this computational cost as gas fees.
Yes. When a business executes a transaction or deploys a complex smart contract on the Ethereum network, that action requires computational effort from the network's decentralized validators. They are expending electricity and hardware depreciation to process your request. You must compensate them for that effort.
So you pay for the computing power.
On the Ethereum network, this fee is paid in microscopic fractions of the native Ethereum coin. Specifically, 1/1000th of an Ethereum coin is denominated as a GWEI. Because this fee is the required fuel to execute operations, it became colloquially known as gas.
So gas is quite literally the computational fuel you must purchase to force the decentralized engine to process your transaction. And that terminology has evolved to become the universal industry standard for transaction fees on almost any blockchain platform.
Precisely. And it is critical for business operations to understand that gas fees are not fixed. They are governed by a dynamic market mechanism based on network congestion.
Like Uber surge pricing.
Exactly like that. If the network is quiet, the gas fee might be a few cents. But if there is a massive surge in demand, say a highly anticipated NFT launch or a period of extreme market volatility where everyone is rushing to trade, users will compete to have their transactions processed first by attaching a higher priority tip to their base gas fee.
Which creates a bidding war for block space. During periods of extreme congestion, the gas fee to execute a simple smart contract can skyrocket to hundreds of dollars. For an enterprise trying to run a high-volume, low-margin supply chain application, a sudden spike in gas fees can completely destroy the unit economics of their operation. You have to factor in network congestion economics when choosing which blockchain to build on.
Which perfectly transitions into an analysis of the major infrastructure platforms available to businesses. The textbook categorizes the major cryptocurrencies based on their primary architectural utility. The first category is store of value coins.
These are cryptocurrencies engineered primarily to retain their purchasing power over long time horizons, functioning similarly to digital precious metals. They're highly resistant to inflation because their monetary policy dictates a hard-capped or tightly controlled total supply. And the undisputed king of this category is obviously Bitcoin, designated by the ticker BTC.
Bitcoin was the genesis of the entire industry. It was launched in early 2009 by an anonymous entity operating under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi mined the original Genesis block, participated in the early network, mined an estimated 1 million bitcoins, and then completely vanished from public communication in July 2010.
The mystery of the founder adds to the mythos, but the value is driven by the code. The protocol strictly enforces a maximum supply of 21 million coins. Aside from one critical vulnerability that was identified and patched way back in 2010, the core cryptographic architecture of the Bitcoin blockchain has remained incredibly resilient, successfully defending against global state-level attacks for over a decade.
That proven security track record is why major global corporations feel comfortable allocating treasury assets to it.
The textbook also highlights Litecoin, or LTC, in this category. It was developed by Charlie Lee in 2011. He recognized that Bitcoin's 10-minute block time was too slow for point-of-sale commerce. He modified the open-source code to create a network that validates blocks 4 times faster, and he increased the maximum supply limit to 84 million coins.
It was designed to be the silver to Bitcoin's gold, optimized for smaller, faster transactions.
And then we have to discuss Dogecoin, D-O-G-E, which honestly always provides a moment of cognitive dissonance when it appears on a serious academic syllabus for corporate finance, because structurally, Dogecoin originated as a literal joke.
It did, it really did. Dogecoin was created in 2013 as a satirical spoof designed to actively mock the wild, irrational investor speculation that was rampant in the early crypto markets. The developers used a popular internet meme of a Shiba Inu dog as its mascot. They intentionally designed it to have an infinite inflationary supply to discourage hoarding.
Yet the irony of the market is that retail investors embraced the joke so enthusiastically that it cultivated a massive, highly engaged community. That community drove speculative demand to such extremes that, at its peak, Dogecoin achieved a market capitalization exceeding $33 billion.
That is just wild.
It is the ultimate empirical proof that in a purely speculative market, community sentiment and behavioral economics can completely override fundamental asset valuation.
It is a fascinating case study in modern market dynamics. But moving away from purely monetary assets, we arrive at the second and arguably most important category for enterprise architecture: smart contract blockchains. This is where the technology evolves from a simple ledger into a decentralized global computer. And the foundational platform in this space is Ethereum, denoted as ETH.
While Ethereum can function as a store of value, its primary architectural purpose is to serve as the foundational execution layer for complex smart contracts and decentralized applications. The textbook references Nick Szabo, a pioneering computer scientist who originally conceptualized smart contracts long before blockchain existed. He provided a brilliant conceptual analogy. He compared a smart contract to a mechanical vending machine.
The vending machine analogy perfectly illustrates the removal of the intermediary. If you walk into a store to buy a soda, you hand $1 to a human cashier. They verify the dollar is real, they hand you the soda, and they process the change. There is friction and required trust.
Right, need a person there.
But a vending machine automates that entire process through hardware logic. You insert the dollar, you press the button corresponding to your selection, and the machine's internal mechanisms automatically execute the agreement. If valid funds are received and a valid selection is made, dispense the specific item and dispense the calculated change.
A smart contract executes that exact same conditional logic, but it does it digitally across a decentralized network. It is an autonomous, self-executing agreement where the terms of the contract are written directly into lines of code deployed on the blockchain. If condition X is met, then automatically execute action Y. Because the contract resides on the blockchain, Its execution is guaranteed, entirely transparent, and mathematically unbreakable.
There is no need for a human escrow agent to hold the funds, no need for a clearinghouse to verify the transfer, and no need for corporate lawyers to enforce the execution. The code enforces itself. However, that immutability introduces a severe operational challenge for software developers. In traditional software development, if you find a bug in your application, you simply write a patch and update the central server. You cannot do that on a blockchain.
Right, because if you could edit a smart contract after it was deployed, it wouldn't be immutable and the trust is broken. The textbook points out that to update the functionality of a decentralized application, developers must deploy an entirely new smart contract onto the blockchain and utilize complex architecture, like a proxy contract, to permanently redirect user traffic and funds from the old flawed contract to the new updated one. It requires incredibly rigorous auditing before deployment.
And to standardize how these smart contracts interact with various assets, the Ethereum community established specific technical protocols. The most ubiquitous is the ERC-20 protocol. This is the technical standard used to create fungible tokens, tokens that act like standard currency, where every token is identical and interchangeable. This is the standard used for the wrapped Bitcoin we discussed and for the vast majority of stablecoins.
But the Ethereum network faces a massive architectural bottleneck, which leads us to the third category of platforms: dApps blockchains, which are aggressively focused on solving the scalability trilemma. I like to call this category the need for speed.
The scalability trilemma in blockchain dictates that it is incredibly difficult to simultaneously achieve profound decentralization, robust security, and massive scalability. The original proof-of-work iteration of Ethereum prioritized decentralization and security, but sacrificed scalability. A complex smart contract transaction could take several minutes to clear, and during peak congestion, the gas fees were extortionate.
From a corporate perspective, you simply cannot run a global, high-frequency financial application or a microtransaction supply chain tracker if every single database entry takes 5 minutes to confirm and costs $50 in network fees. It is commercially unviable.
Therefore, developers engineered alternative Layer 1 blockchains specifically optimized for high throughput and low latency execution, usually by adopting proof-of-stake or proof-of-authority consensus models that sacrifice a degree of decentralization to achieve massive speed. The textbook highlights 3 major competitors challenging Ethereum's dominance. The first is Binance, operating the Binance Smart Chain, or BNB.
Binance is the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world, and they launched their own proprietary blockchain in 2020.
To achieve high performance, the Binance Smart Chain utilizes a proof-of-authority consensus mechanism. Instead of thousands of anonymous validators, the network relies on a highly restricted pool of just 21 approved validators to process blocks.
Wow, just 21. That's very small.
By centralizing the consensus process among a small, trusted group, the network can efficiently process roughly 60 transactions per second with significantly lower transaction fees than Ethereum.
It is faster, but highly centralized. The second major competitor is Cardano, trading as a TA.
Cardano was built from the ground up as a pure proof-of-stake architecture, emphasizing rigorous, peer-reviewed academic research in its development. It boasts a throughput of approximately 250 transactions per second, and because it avoids the computational overhead of proof-of-work, the transaction fees remain remarkably low, typically costing less than 2 cents per operation.
But if we are talking about raw, unadulterated speed, we have to look at the third platform, Solana, or SOL.
Solana represents a fundamental redesign of blockchain architecture. It utilizes proof-of-stake combined with the proof-of-history cryptographic clock we discussed earlier.
The clock.
By constantly time-stamping transactions, the network nodes don't have to wait to communicate and agree on the chronological order of every block. This architectural breakthrough allows Solana to achieve a staggering theoretical throughput of 65,000 transactions per second.
Let me contextualize that for a moment. 65,000 transactions per second is approaching the processing capacity of the traditional Visa or MasterCard global payment networks. And the operational cost to execute a transaction on Solana is a fraction of a cent. That combination of massive scale and microscopic cost makes it a highly attractive platform for developers building consumer-facing decentralized applications, or dApps, that require high-frequency interactions.
However, even if a business utilizes a network as fast and cheap as Solana, they still face the fundamental problem of price stability. A corporate supply chain cannot function if the native token they use to pay vendors drops 15% in purchasing power overnight. To make decentralized infrastructure viable for traditional commerce, the ecosystem had to engineer a solution to volatility.
Which brings us to a critical innovation. Conceptually, how do you bridge the stability of traditional finance with the efficiency of blockchain? You create a stablecoin. How do these specific assets function?
A stablecoin is a specialized cryptocurrency engineered to maintain a stable, fixed valuation. It achieves this lack of volatility by structurally pegging its value to a less volatile, real-world external asset, most commonly fiat currency like the US dollar.
Okay, so it mirrors the dollar.
Exactly. The operational mandate of a dollar-pegged stablecoin is that one token must always equal exactly $1 on the open market, regardless of broader crypto market crashes. The textbook details 3 distinct architectural models developers use to maintain this peg.
The first and most widely adopted model is the Fiat-Collateralized stablecoin. This seems the most intuitively straightforward to a traditional accountant. The textbook points to Tether, denoted as USDT, and USD Coin, or USDC, as the primary examples.
In a collateralized model, a centralized corporate entity issues the stablecoin on the blockchain, and for every single token they mint, they hold an equivalent value of traditional fiat currency or highly liquid cash equivalents like short-term U.S. Treasury bills in a regulated, real-world bank vault.
So it operates on a strict 1-to-1 reserve ratio. If there are 50 billion USDC tokens circulating on the Ethereum network, the issuing company, Circle, theoretically holds 50 billion physical dollars in reserve. If a corporate client wants to redeem 10 million USDC, Circle destroys the digital tokens and wires 10 million real dollars to the client's corporate bank account.
It provides immense stability.
But it introduces traditional counterparty risk, right? You have to trust that the central company is actually holding the reserves and is surviving rigorous financial audits.
To eliminate that centralized counterparty risk, developers engineered the second model, the algorithmic stablecoin. The textbook uses Terra USD, or USD, as the case study here.
Algorithmic stablecoins are fascinating because they attempt to maintain the peg without holding any actual dollars in a bank vault. How does the math work?
An algorithmic stablecoin operates on its own dedicated blockchain and relies entirely on autonomous smart contracts and complex arbitrage incentives to regulate supply and demand. In the case of Terra, the stablecoin UST was paired with a volatile native sister coin called Luna.
Okay.
The smart contract protocol dictated that you could always, regardless of market conditions, exchange $1 worth of Luna to mint exactly 1 UST token, or burn 1 UST token to mint $1 worth of Luna.
So it creates an automatic arbitrage loop. If the price of the UST stablecoin accidentally drops to 98 cents on the open market, traders are financially incentivized to buy the discounted UST for 98 cents, send it to the smart contract, and receive a full dollar's worth of Luna in return, pocketing an instant 2-cent risk-free profit. By buying the discounted UST, they increase market demand, which automatically pushes the price back up to exactly $1.
Exactly. The algorithm dynamically expands and contracts the token supply to enforce the peg. However, it is highly experimental and structurally fragile. If market confidence evaporates rapidly, it can trigger a hyperinflationary death spiral, where the protocol prints infinite amounts of the sister coin to try and save the stablecoin, ultimately destroying the value of both assets entirely.
Which highlights the immense systemic risk of purely algorithmic models. The third model attempts to find a middle ground. The Crypto-Collateralized Stablecoin, exemplified by DAI, or DAI.
DAI, managed by the Maker DAO protocol, is pegged to the US dollar. But unlike USDC, it is backed entirely by decentralized cryptocurrency, primarily Ethereum, locked in smart contracts. But because Ethereum is highly volatile, the protocol requires massive over-collateralization to protect the peg.
Walk us through the mechanics of that over-collateralization.
If a user wants to generate $100 worth of the DAI stablecoin, they cannot simply deposit $100 worth of Ethereum. Because the price of Ethereum might drop tomorrow, the smart contract requires them to deposit, for example, $150 worth of Ethereum as collateral.
A safety buffer.
Exactly. If the market price of Ethereum suddenly crashes, the smart contract utilizes automated liquidation rules to instantly sell the Ethereum collateral on the open market to ensure that the outstanding DAI stablecoin remains fully backed by sufficient value. It uses game theory and algorithmic risk management to maintain a dollar peg using highly volatile collateral.
Okay, I have to ask the critical operational question here. If a business goes through all the complex architecture to use a stablecoin that is intentionally designed to just mimic the US dollar, why not just use a traditional US dollar? Why jump through all these cryptographic hoops?
That question is the perfect bridge into our final major section on decentralized finance. The reason an enterprise utilizes a stablecoin rather than a traditional fiat bank account comes down to global integration, execution speed, and programmable logic.
Okay.
If a multinational corporation operates purely in physical US dollars, they are entirely bound by the friction of the legacy banking system. They are constrained by banking hours, weekend closures, hefty international wire transfer fees, and clearinghouse delays. A cross-border corporate settlement might take 3 to 5 business days to fully clear.
But if they tokenize those dollars as a stablecoin like USDC, the asset now lives natively on the blockchain infrastructure.
Precisely. They can execute a smart contract instantly, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with any entity on the globe. They can settle a $50 million transaction in seconds with final cryptographic certainty for a transaction fee of a few cents. Stablecoins provide the predictability of fiat currencies supercharged by the technological capabilities of the blockchain.
It is about removing the friction of legacy financial infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that entire ecosystem of programmable money is what we call DeFi, or decentralized finance. Let's define the contrast here.
Traditional finance, or TradFi, mandates the use of centralized rent-seeking intermediaries. Banks, brokerage houses, and credit unions sit in the middle of every transaction. They custody your capital, they dictate lending requirements, they decide who gets approved for a mortgage, and they extract a significant percentage of the value for providing that service.
Right.
DeFi completely disintermediates that entire structure. It replaces the corporate institution with autonomous smart contracts built on public blockchains to facilitate peer-to-peer financial transactions.
So anyone with an internet connection and a digital wallet can lend capital to a liquidity pool and earn interest, or borrow capital instantly against their collateral, interacting only with lines of code.
Exactly. The implications for global business are profound. Advocates of DeFi argue it represents the next evolution of capital markets because it is vastly more efficient, transparent, and significantly cheaper to operate.
It's neutral, right?
Yes, perhaps its most disruptive characteristic is its inherent neutrality. A smart contract does not know your geographic location, your gender, your race, or your traditional credit score. It only verifies cryptographic signatures and collateral ratios.
This means DeFi possesses the potential to systematically eliminate institutional discrimination in lending. It can provide sophisticated financial services, yield generation, collateralized lending, global value transfer to the estimated 1.5 billion people worldwide who are currently completely excluded from the traditional banking system due to lack of infrastructure or identity documentation.
It is a staggering socioeconomic implication, but this raises a governance question. If a decentralized lending protocol handles billions of dollars in assets, but there is no CEO, no board of directors, and no corporate headquarters, how are operational decisions made? How does the protocol upgrade its code or adjust interest rates? The textbook introduces the mechanism for this, the DAO.
A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization.
Yeah.
I like to visualize it as a massive, globally distributed digital co-op.
That is an accurate framework. In a DAO, individuals pool their capital into a shared smart contract to pursue a specific mandate, perhaps managing a DeFi protocol, acquiring digital art, or funding open source development. The foundational rules, operational bylaws, and governance structures are hard-coded directly into the smart contract. There is no executive suite making unilateral decisions.
So how is consensus achieved on organizational changes?
Any proposed changes to the protocol's code or decisions on how the Treasury funds are allocated must be formally proposed and voted upon by the community. Voting power is typically distributed via governance tokens. The more tokens a participant holds, the more weight their vote carries in the automated tally.
Very democratic.
If the proposal achieves a majority consensus based on the hard-coded parameters, the smart contract automatically executes the change. It is corporate management executed by algorithmic consensus.
And how do everyday consumers and businesses actually interface with all these complex smart contracts and DAOs? They utilize dApps, or decentralized applications?
Right. If you look at nearly every application on your smartphone today, your banking app, your ride-sharing app, your social media feed, they are structurally centralized. They rely entirely on a back-end server controlled by a single massive corporation.
Right.
If the corporation server goes down, the app breaks. If the corporation decides they don't like your activity, they can unilaterally delete your account or remove the app from the centralized app store.
dApps fundamentally alter that power dynamic. A decentralized application is one where the user-facing interface, the front end, might look exactly like a traditional website or app, but the back-end logic and the database are running entirely on a decentralized peer-to-peer blockchain network. No single entity controls the back end, meaning no single entity can censor the application or shut it down.
The textbook provides several compelling examples of dApps gaining traction. We see financial dApps like Orca, which is an automated market maker built on the high-speed Solana blockchain. Orca allows users to instantly swap various cryptocurrencies and provide liquidity to earn yield, completely anonymously, with execution times in milliseconds and negligible fees.
The textbook also highlights how this decentralization is disrupting the gaming industry, using Alien Worlds as an example.
Alien Worlds is a fascinating implementation built on the Binance Smart Chain. It is a decentralized metaverse game where players compete to extract a digital resource called Trillium, or TLM. But here is the critical distinction. TLM is not just a meaningless in-game point system. It is a real, cryptographically secure token residing on the blockchain.
Which means it has real-world liquidity. Players can extract TLM in the game, transfer it to a decentralized exchange, and swap it for Bitcoin or a stablecoin, and eventually convert it into fiat currency to pay their rent. The players are quite literally extracting tangible economic value by participating in a decentralized digital economy.
Which perfectly sets up our final architectural concept, the mechanism for establishing unique digital ownership within these digital economies. We have to examine NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. Let's start by defining the economic terminology. What is the fundamental difference between a fungible asset and a non-fungible asset?
A fungible asset is an item that can be freely exchanged for an exact, identical duplicate without any loss or change in intrinsic value. A US dollar bill is fungible. If I give you $1 and you give me a different dollar bill back, neither of us cares because the value is identical. A Bitcoin is fungible. My Bitcoin is economically indistinguishable from your Bitcoin.
Conversely, a non-fungible asset is structurally unique. It cannot be duplicated or seamlessly replaced with something similar because its specific unique properties dictate its value. A piece of real estate is non-fungible. The original Mona Lisa painting is non-fungible.
And in the context of blockchain, an NFT is a specialized cryptographic token that represents the absolute verifiable ownership of a unique digital asset. The textbook notes that the vast majority of NFTs are currently digital artwork or collectibles secured on the Ethereum network, utilizing a specific technical standard known as the ERC-721 protocol.
While the ERC-20 protocol is used to mint fungible tokens like currency, the ERC-721 protocol is designed so that every single token minted has a unique, verifiable digital identifier. The smart contract essentially wraps a permanent digital certificate of authenticity around a piece of data, like a JPEG image or a video file, proving unequivocally that this specific token is the one true original, and granting the holder of the token's private keys exclusive rights to it.
And this is where traditional analysts usually express profound skepticism. They ask, why would anyone pay $100,000 for a digital image of an ape when I can simply right-click the image, save it to my hard drive, and look at the exact same pixels for free?
It is a valid question that requires understanding the difference between viewing an asset and owning the provenance of an asset. You can buy a highly realistic, visually identical poster of the Mona Lisa in the museum gift shop for $10. You can hang it on your wall and look at it every day.
But it's not the real thing.
Right, but you do not own the Mona Lisa, and you cannot sell it at Sotheby's for $100 million because you do not possess the verifiable provenance of the original. An NFT provides that exact same cryptographic provenance for digital assets.
The value of an NFT is derived from the exact same network effect as cryptocurrency. It possesses value because a community of buyers fundamentally believes the verifiable provenance has value. Collectors purchase them to financially support digital artists, to gain exclusive access to private communities, for digital bragging rights, or simply as high-risk speculative investments. And as the textbook clearly notes, the current market for NFT art is characterized by extreme, unpredictable volatility.
So if we look past the current speculative frenzy surrounding digital art, is the concept of the NFT merely a temporary cultural fad, akin to a digital version of the 1990s Beanie Baby craze? Or is there a long-term structural business application for non-fungible cryptography?
The textbook offers a highly pragmatic, long-term perspective. While the speculative pricing of cartoon JPEGs will likely normalize or collapse, the underlying technological capability to unequivocally prove the ownership of a unique digital asset is a massive infrastructure upgrade for the internet. As corporate strategy shifts increasingly toward metaverse environments, persistent, immersive virtual reality spaces for commerce and social interaction, NFTs will become the foundational layer of that economy.
Exactly. NFTs will evolve far beyond art. They will serve as the cryptographic infrastructure for proving ownership of your digital identity credentials, your virtual real estate, the digital clothing your avatar wears, or the digital assets decorating a virtual corporate headquarters.
That is wild.
Furthermore, in traditional enterprise, we are already seeing the adoption of digital twins, where a unique physical asset, like a commercial jet engine or a shipping container, is paired with an NFT on a blockchain to track its complete maintenance history and supply chain journey immutably. The technology is permanent, even if the current art speculation is transient.
And that comprehensive look at digital provenance wraps up our incredibly dense journey through Module 22. We have covered an immense amount of architectural and economic ground today. We started with the foundational mechanics of blockchain, unpacking how cryptographic hashes and packet switching create an immutable digital Jenga tower. We debated the energy-intensive constraints of proof of work versus the capital efficiency of proof-of-stake consensus mechanisms.
We examined the operational reality of managing cryptographic keys across cold storage and hot wallets, evaluated the counterparty risks of centralized exchanges, and dissected the devastating mechanics of pig butchering scams, rug pulls, and sophisticated social engineering.
We analyzed the necessity of wrapped tokens for interoperability, the fluctuating economics of network gas fees, and the intense speed wars between platforms like Ethereum and Solana. We explored how stablecoins attempt to peg volatility, and ultimately how decentralized finance, DAOs, and NFTs could literally restructure global capital markets and provide robust financial infrastructure to the unbanked populations of the world.
It truly represents a fundamental paradigm shift in enterprise IT. We are actively witnessing the transition from an internet designed purely for the exchange of information to a cryptographically secure internet designed for the seamless exchange of value and trust. Understanding the intricate plumbing of this new decentralized infrastructure is going to be a critical, non-negotiable skill for any future executive or systems architect.
Absolutely. The ledger is replacing the intermediary. I want to say a profound thank you to you, our listener, for sticking with us and diving deep into this highly complex foundational architecture.
It was a lot to cover.
It was. If you experienced an aha moment during today's analysis, please take a second to like, subscribe, follow, and share this deep dive with your network. And most importantly, we need you to leave us a comment below because we want to hear your specific analytical take on this question.
Think critically about your own intended career path, or analyze a traditional business you frequent regularly. How could they tangibly implement a specific smart contract function or a blockchain ledger feature to drastically improve their operational efficiency or permanently resolve a customer trust issue? Let us know in the comments. I am highly curious to see the enterprise use cases you formulate outside of the traditional finance sector.
I'm looking forward to reading those as well. Next time, we are pivoting gears significantly as we tackle Module 23, Review of Excel Fundamentals. Now, you might assume you already know your way around a basic spreadsheet, but wait until we uncover the hidden enterprise-grade analytics features that can completely transform the speed and accuracy with which you make critical business decisions. It is going to be a highly practical, operational game changer.
And as you move forward, remember, whether it is artificial intelligence acting as the autonomous analytical brain, or blockchain serving as the mathematically secure, immutable ledger, the foundational tools of tomorrow's enterprise architecture are being deployed today.
So ensure you understand the infrastructure, always secure your private keys, and we will see you on the next deep dive.